Border control officers tortured me for 8 hours not knowing their government personally wanted me there. I arrived in the country exhausted, but excited to receive my humanitarian award the next day. The officer, a large man with a crew cut, looked from me to my passport, his expression growing hostile when he saw where I was from. He said something to me, but my grasp on the language here was limited, so I just shook my head. He snapped his fingers in my face and shouted, "You, terrorist?" When I shook my head, confused, he made an explosion gesture with his hands. Boom boom? You want boom boom? I tried to show him my invitation letter from his government, but he slapped it away without looking. No, you problem. Big problem. He called another officer over, a woman who looked at me like I was diseased. They pulled me into a small room, speaking rapidly to each other in their language I couldn't follow. The woman said something long and complicated to me, and when I looked confused, she laughed. Stupid. He's stupid too. She spoke again, very fast, then shook her head when I didn't respond. Off, clothes, off. She started pulling at my jacket herself when I hesitated. The female officer dumped my bag while I was still trying to understand what was happening. She found my prayer beads and threw them against the wall, scattering them everywhere. She held up my medal from the UN and said something with many words I didn't know. When I reached for it, she threw it in the trash. Fake. You understand fake? She tore up my documents without reading them, including the invitation with the official government seal. The male officer said something that made them both laugh, but I only caught the word toilet and saw him make a flushing gesture. The male officer forced me to strip to my underwear, getting frustrated when I didn't understand his initial commands. "Are you deaf or just R-worded?" he said, though I only understood the angry tone. They left me standing nearly naked while they ate lunch in front of me. The woman pointed at my body and said a long sentence to her partner. When I didn't react, she said slowly, "You, ugly, starving, R-A-T." They both laughed at how she had to simplify for me. When I reached for my clothes because I was cold, the female officer grabbed my wrist and bent it backward until I cried out. She said something complex and angry, then simplified, "No, bad, you bad." She bent my wrist again. The male officer started pushing me against the wall, saying something after each push that sounded like a question. When I didn't answer, he pushed harder. "He doesn't even understand when we're interrogating him," the woman said to her partner. They brought in a drug dog, and the male officer gave me a long command I couldn't understand. When I stood there confused, he forced me onto all fours. Dog position. You understand, dog? Woof woof. The dog was aggressive, barking in my face while they had what sounded like a whole conversation about me. The woman kept saying suspicious, which was one word I knew, pointing at me and making the dog bark more. The woman found my phone and showed it to her partner, having a long discussion while pointing at my contacts written in my language's script. "Terrorist names," she said slowly to me. "All terrorist." She scrolled through my messages, shaking her head and saying things I didn't understand, occasionally showing the screen to her partner who would react with disgust. Then she looked at me and very slowly said, "You go prison long time," before smashing my phone against the table. They made me do jumping jacks, the male officer demonstrating first while saying something that made his partner laugh. When I was too slow, he sprayed me with cold water. "Faster, faster!" When I collapsed from exhaustion, they stood over me having a conversation where I heard pathetic and weak, mixed with words I didn't know. The woman threw paper towels at me. "Clean, you dirty pig. Oink, oink." The male officer put on latex gloves and said a long sentence with medical-sounding words. When I looked confused, he just said, "Bend." He conducted an invasive body cavity search while saying things to his partner that made her laugh. I was crying from pain and humiliation, but couldn't understand their commentary, except when she said slowly, "Baby, don't cry, baby." They handcuffed me to a chair, and the male officer held a taser, speaking in a long, threatening tone. I recognized none of it except when he simplified, "Zap, zap." Understand? Electric. He pressed it against my neck without activating it. The woman said something about Guantanamo, and they both laughed. "No lawyers, no phone calls, no one will ever know," she said, though I only understood her. Threatening gestures of zipping her lips and drawing across her throat. The female officer took out scissors and started cutting my hair off in chunks. "Pretty now?" she said sarcastically. She was in the middle of saying something long to her partner about booking procedures when her phone rang. She answered casually, speaking quickly, then suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Her face went completely white. "What do you mean, State Department? What do you mean, Peace Prize?" She looked at me, then at my destroyed belongings, then at her partner who was still holding the taser. The male officer grabbed the phone, and I watched his face transform from confusion to horror as someone apparently explained who I was in rapid English I couldn't follow, but I understood two words clearly: presidential and ceremony. His mouth opened and closed as he stared at me sitting there handcuffed, soaking wet, hair butchered, nearly naked. Full story on the channel below.